Billionaire gives his credit card to two women to test them, but what the maid did broke his heart. The skyline threw its cold silver back at Leo Hartley as he stood with his coffee in the penthouse that had cost him more than most people would ever see. He liked the view for its distance. Far enough that everything looked small and neat, the way he wanted people to be. The card sat on the marble counter beside him, harmless as a playing chip. He had slept badly again, but that was not unusual. His mind had been rehearsing this idea, the way he had rehearsed deals, by running it through every angle, until cynicism looked like wisdom. Vanessa laughed when he explained it to her, a bright bell of a sound that belonged in clubs and lounges. She wore a dress that did not need an introduction. He watched her take the card between two fingers and hold it up to the light as if admiring the endlessness of it. "Buy whatever you think I need most," he said. He made his voice flat to show that it was a rule, not an invitation. "You are going to be glad you asked me," she said, kissing the air beside his cheek. She left a scent that reminded him of citrus and expensive promises. Mara stood by the doorway, hands folded, the quiet order of her uniform against the scatter of mourning. She had been arranging fresh flowers when he called her in. It took her a second to step closer, as if she was certain he could not possibly mean her. He saw the change in her eyes when she realized he did. "The same for you," he said. "One day, bring me what I need." She looked at the card as if it were a token cursed by some fairy tale, something that would test not skill, but soul. Then she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Hartley." It amused him to give them both the same chance. One woman who had told him all the right lies with honey on her tongue, and one who hardly spoke at all. A pair of windows to see himself through. He had read a book once that said a man could be measured by his reflection in others. He had thrown that book away. Vanessa left immediately, heels ticking like a metronome of appetite. Mara left a few minutes later, with a glance around the apartment, as if memorizing its quiet. He played at work. He answered messages with the efficiency of a blade. He signed things. He destroyed other things. The card's digital pulse moved across his thoughts like a heartbeat he pretended he did not hear. He could imagine Vanessa in a mirror of glass and steel, pulling racks of suits onto the floor, ordering truffles and vintage wine, moving through his name as if it were a runway. He imagined the clerk's smile when she said, "Put it on Leo Hartley." He imagined the glimmer of social posts, the curated captions, the chorus of yes. Mara was harder to imagine. He had seen her almost every day for months. She was a fact of his mornings, a quiet correction to his messes, an arrangement of pastries on a tray, a small reminder that the world could be put back together with patience. He knew her hands better than her voice, calloused from work and dry from soap. He did not know where those hands would go when he told her to buy him what he needed most. By late afternoon, the door opened, and Vanessa breezed in with a flotilla of shopping bags and two assistants whose faces were shiny with relief. There were boxes with embossed logos and a garment bag that looked like it had a pedigree. There was a watch in a velvet coffin, rare and heavy, that a salesman had probably kissed before placing it in her palm. A bottle of something that cost more than a car was presented like proof of love. "I studied you," she said, her eyes glittering. "Your interviews, your photos, the way people talk when they say your name. You need scale. You need to be seen. Your brand is ice and distance, and it works, but it is time to show teeth. So I bought you a legend." She showed him a reservation for a private club that probably sold nights as if they were perfect weather. A sponsorship for a gala that would seat him next to people whose faces lived on covers. A sculpture, large and terrible, that would dominate the entryway to his office and whisper that no one should waste his time. A jacket cut sharp enough to answer questions before they were asked. She had also placed a deposit on a car with a color named after a hurricane and hired a photographer to follow him for a magazine spread about power. He nodded. He knew the grammar of what she had done. He even admired the precision. He could see the story she was building around the story he already told. It was not wrong. It was just complete, in a way that felt empty. He was still touching the watch when the doorman called up and said in his polite, unhurried voice that there was an envelope for Mr. Hartley, hand-delivered, urgent and gentle at the same time. Inside, on folded cream, was an address he knew only by what most people called it, the quiet place. A short line in a hand he recognized as Mara's. "If you have an hour, please come." He went without telling Vanessa, who had settled on his couch and was already arranging the next move on her phone. The car ride cut through the city, like a needle. The The sky had softened when he arrived. Trees arched over the path, branches stitched against light. He had not been there since he was young and not rich, when grief had felt like a storm he could outrun. The woman at the small office nodded, as if she knew his name but did not intend to use it. Mara stood beside a patch of ground that had, until that day, been nameless. She wore her same uniform with a black ribbon tied simply in her hair. There were flowers that matched nothing in a catalogue, wild and awkward, chosen for a memory rather than a photo shoot. Beside her were the doorman, the chauffeur, the housekeeper from the floor below, and the cook with flour still on her sleeve. They stood with their hands linked or clasped, trying not to stare at him, trying to give privacy to a man who had made a profession out of not needing it. He saw the stone. He saw the name. He saw the dates. He saw the line beneath, a line he had not thought about since the room with peeling paint, and a woman's voice singing over the scrape of a spoon in a pot. The line was from a lullaby she used to hum when the lights went out because the apartment had to choose between warmth and brightness. For a moment his vision went white. He had not noticed until then that he had been holding his breath for years. Mara stepped toward him and offered the card back, balanced on her open palm as if it burned. "I am sorry," she said. "I found her ashes on the high shelf in your study when I dusted. The box had no name. I thought about it for a long time. Tell me if I was wrong." He took the card and put it in his pocket without looking. He looked at the stone instead, and then he looked at her. "You were not wrong," he said, and the words caught like a shirt on a nail. He had built so many rooms inside himself that there was very little air left. They stood together while a man in a plain suit spoke a few words that felt right, not because they were clever, but because they were simple. The cook sniffed into her handkerchief. The doorman wiped his eye as if dust had flown into it. The ground accepted what it had been given. Mara held the small bunch of clover she had gathered, and then she set it down. Later, Mara handed him a thin folder. Receipts, official forms, a list of calls she had made. The plot, the stone, the arrangements for a small charitable fund in his mother's name, to buy books for the local library, where she used to take him when the heat kept them off the street. It was all paid, processed, done. "I could have asked you," she said softly. "But sometimes asking is a way to let someone refuse. You told me to buy what you need. I think you needed a place to visit when nights are empty. A place where the truth does not flinch." He swallowed something hard and bitter that tasted like regret and relief. He had not been broken by the market, not by men who had tried to roll him. He had been broken by a woman in a uniform, by a ribbon, by a stone, by a song that he had not allowed himself to hear. On the ride back he looked out at the city, and did not see a board to play on. He saw streets. He saw windows. He saw the life he had been paying people to keep away from him. Vanessa was waiting with champagne, and the plan for the party that would crown him. She straightened when she saw his face, and for a flicker she looked unsure, as if she could not find his name in her script. "How did you spend your day?" she asked, bright and ready. "I was given what I needed," he said. He looked past her at the bags, at the watch, at the sculpture, whose chrome would blind his walls. He thought of the stone with the line beneath a name. He thought of the small green clover on New Earth. Mara had gone before he returned. The work she had chosen to do finished. On the kitchen counter, next to a single cup and a saucer, she had left a note that said she had put fresh flowers in the bedroom, that the laundry was folded, that dinner was in the oven if he wanted it. The ordinary, enormous kindness of it broke him all over again. He had meant to test them. It never occurred to him that the answer would test him back. Vanessa slid the black card into her lambskin wallet as if it had been made for it, a perfect fit that affirmations and good lighting had long promised. She checked her front camera and tilted her chin until the city behind her became an accessory. Leo's name was stamped on the card, and she liked the feel of those letters under her thumb. She liked the story she could tell even more. A driver opened the town car door, and she stepped in with a grin already set, a grin she had practiced that said playful, unbothered, in control. In the group chat lighting up her phone, she typed a line about errands and a surprise for her favorite man, then a winking heart. She added a voice note for her followers, about making bold moves, about investing in the people who invest in you. Every sentence had its call to action, every breath a hook. The first stop was a watch boutique where the carpet hushed every footfall and glass cases threw diamonds into daylight. She wanted something with heritage, something that said gravity, not glitter. The associate who met her had that gentle expression trained by years of wealth, and he brought out a tray lined with velvet. Time ticked under crystal. She knew which one she would pick before he even set them down. The face was clean and balanced. The bracelet hugged her skin when she tried it on, and the weight of it made her wrist feel like a promise. For him, she said, and let the words carry. She held her phone low to catch the reflection of the watch in the case, her lips parted in a half smile. She spoke about craftsmanship and legacy, letting the syllables wrap around her. The associate wrapped the box with ribbon, as if it were a ceremony. The card glided, the receipt printed, and her phone caught the slip of paper like a trophy. Her comments blew up with fire emojis and declarations of relationship goals. She swiped through them with lazy grace, while the driver took her to the next thing. The showroom smelled like leather and triumph. Cars stretched under lights, all muscle and curve, paint so deep it seemed to hold another sky. Vanessa's heels clicked, and a salesman in a perfectly aligned tie appeared with a key fob on a tray. She had done her research. She knew the model that would photograph best when it pulled up to an event, the one with doors that rose like wings and seats that would contour to Leo's restless posture. "This one for weekends," she said. "This one for the announcement." The salesman nodded with reverence. She set the card down and watched his eyes widen for a breath, then returned to neutral like a curtain falling. Reservation confirmed. There would be content when the car arrived. There would be a time when she tossed the fob into the air and caught it with a laugh. There would be a caption about catching flights and feelings. She could already hear the music she would lay over the clip, the beat dropping right when the engine turned over. Between stops, she texted a stylist she had been courting for months, and a publicist who had once bowed out of a project because it did not have a name big enough. Leo did. She said the words, campaign, and launch, and reframe. She threw in the phrase image makeover with quotation marks as if she were pulling the strings of irony rather than simply pulling strings. She booked a corner suite at the hotel with the wraparound balcony and the perfect golden hour. She reserved a rooftop with a helipad and a courtyard with olive trees and lanterns that would look like stars in photographs. Hair, grooming, a tailor who could coax fabric into authority. A photographer known for making titans look human and humans look mythic. A speech coach who would smooth the edges of Leo's sentences without sanding down the parts that made him interesting. She hired a drone team and a social producer and a florist who never repeated a color story. She paid retainers and deposits with a tap, the card always returning to her palm like a trained bird. "For him," she said, to everyone who asked. "For him, and for us," she added under her breath as she posted a behind-the-scenes clip of mood boards and swatches and glossy tears from old issues of magazines. She gave her followers a peek at a rack of suits and a tray of cufflinks that looked like constellations. She teased an announcement with a slideshow of blurred lights and the outline of a man at a window, the caption a string of syllables that meant everything and nothing at once. She ate late, if eating counted as letting a tray of sushi drift past her while she filmed sparkling water condensate down the side of a glass. The table was a rectangle of light in a shadowed room, a private club where the waiters knew her first name and her angles. She took the VIP table near the window where the skyline was a lattice of gold and steel. The music swelled and thinned and swelled again, just enough to make everything feel cinematic. She ordered bottles dressed in sparklers, not for herself, she said, but to celebrate the people who delivered. The captions wrote themselves: gratitude, glow, get it. People drifted through. A model with a laugh like cymbals, a pair of entrepreneurs who had built something with code and luck, a director who was happy to be seen nodding at her ideas. She let them stand in the halo of her lens, and then moved them along like a benevolent host. At some point she lifted her phone and went live, the chat a stream flashing fast enough to feel like weather. She talked about how love lifts, about how real ones invest in potential, about partnerships that are bigger than romance. She said that anyone can buy a bag, but vision gives returns. The phrasing had edges she had honed over years of practice, soft enough to soothe, sharp enough to cut. Later, in a luxury showroom lined with suits under museum light, she signed contracts with a pen that weighed the same as a good secret. She walked through a plan that would drape Leo in narrative, a sequence that began with a charity visit and ended with a profile in a magazine that only lands on certain coffee tables. She placed a call to secure a speech in front of an audience that would clap the right way, not too eager, not too hard. She told herself this was what loyalty looked like. She told herself this was what love does when given the opportunity to scale. Her phone kept buzzing. A bank notification tried to crawl into her awareness and failed because she would not let anything interrupt the glow. She was building. She was placing bets with a confidence that had gotten her from borrowed dresses to showroom doors opening without questions. In the glass, in the curve of a car hood, and a watch crystal, and the long mirror of the dressing room, she rehearsed the reveal. She imagined Leo's face when he saw the watch, the car, the wall of mood boards that told him who he could be next. She imagined a softened look, a grateful one, the sort of gaze that anchors you in someone else's storm. Vanessa tucked the card away and felt the shape of it like a certificate under her skin. Content was scheduled. Deliverables had due dates. She had promised results and applause, and a new coat of polish on an old kind of power. Outside, the city came up like a crown, and she lifted her chin again to fit it. At the curb, the driver opened the door as if nothing in the world had weight. She climbed in and exhaled in a single smooth line, and behind her the door fell shut, with a sound like a sealed secret. The alert found him in the quiet between meetings, a thin note from his security stack that cut through the filtered air of the glass office. It landed in Leo's inbox with a red flag and a string of merchant codes that did not match either of the paths he had mapped in his head for the card. Not the boutiques he had imagined for one of them, not the household staples he had predicted for the other. Midtown, the report said. Hospitals, a shelter, a school cafeteria, a locksmith, city records. He leaned back and read the list again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something reasonable. Midtown was not where either woman worked or lived. Midtown did not have the dressmaker he had recommended or the charity gala he had hinted at. Midtown meant transients and office towers, and the thousand errands of people who did not have drivers or assistants. Midtown meant anonymous crowds. Midtown meant someone else had the card. His jaw tightened at the idea of it, the image of the titanium rectangle changing hands in a fluorescent lobby or a subway car. He remembered his father, bent over the kitchen table during a winter when the heat rattled weakly through old pipes, explaining what a promise meant. We keep track, Leo, because no one keeps track for us. He had grown up to build systems that kept track for him, and now the system was telling him his plan had spun out. He dialed into the floor below, where his private security firm kept a command nest of black screens and restless men. Hale answered, his voice unruffled, the tone of someone who had seen trouble in cleaner shapes than this. Unusual pattern, Leo said, and read the merchants off slowly. Hospitals, a shelter, a school cafeteria, a locksmith, city records, Midtown cluster, late morning to early afternoon. The card should be with one of two women. I want eyes. I want it back. Hale did not ask if Leo wanted to shut the card down. He knew Leo liked to watch a problem move before he pinned it. He set his people in motion, and downtown fed into Midtown, a current of quiet men with discreet badges and cooperative clerks. Leo watched remotely as Hale took the west side first. A locksmith, on a block with a newsstand and a falafel cart, remembered a young woman with a braid tucked into the collar of her coat. The braid and the coat did not sit on the same person long in most neighborhoods, the clerk said, and he had liked the steadiness of her eyes when she paid. She did not have a coat fancy enough for that card, the clerk added, and Hale offered a bland smile that concealed the shape of his interest. What did she ask for? Rekey job, third floor in a walk-up nearby. The old lock stuck, and the tenant could not get the door shut. Paid in full, and tipped in cash. Hale left a card, and turned his steps toward the brownstone, where he had seen uniforms and brass plates in other lives. At the school, behind a chain-link fence and a mural peeling at the edges, the cafeteria manager said the girl with the braid had paid down a ledger. Not one child, not 1 month, but the heap of it. The manager kept his arms folded while he talked, as if someone might snatch the relief from his hands if he told the story in the wrong tone. She asked how much would clear the red names. She said not to attach her name to it. She asked where the money went when the kids could not pay. I told her the truth. She did not flinch. She paid. She smiled at a boy with a hole in his sneaker. Then she left. Leo watched this unfold with a strange mix of heat and chill moving under his ribs. He watched the hospital footage next, tiled in black and gray. The security desk showed a woman in dark jeans and a shirt only a housekeeper would buy on clearance, her braid now a rope down her back. She spoke to billing, not triage. She waited without sitting. She paid on behalf of a patient whose name she spoke carefully. She kept her head down the way people do in places that have learned to be indifferent. City records confirmed her last stop. A clerk remembered the eyes and the braid and the way the woman held a folded paper like a talisman. She wanted copies. She wanted to know about a guardianship. She paid for certified forms that took the clerk too long to find. She thanked him anyway. The lines in his face softened as he told the story to Hale. The shelter staff knew her too. She had donated vouchers and made sure the list of women with small children got priority for the family rooms. She asked if the lock on the back entrance was fixed. She asked about Gloria, who had been missing 2 nights last week. She did not sit. She did not stop moving. It looked like someone holding the day together with both hands so nothing slid through the cracks. Leo pressed his palm to the cool edge of his desk and studied the map Hale had sketched, a set of dots in a narrow corridor running down the center of the city. He wanted to be angry. It was safer than the jolt he kept feeling when the details stacked up. It was supposed to be a test, clean lines, and easy metrics. One of them would show him hunger. One of them would show him greed. He had not designed this for a third category. Find her, he said. The words came out flat. Bring her. Here. Hale did not remind him that they could meet in some neutral space. Hale knew his employer preferred home turf when the ground beneath him started to tilt. He moved toward the last address on the locksmith docket, a walk-up that had not seen paint since a younger mayor promised historic preservation. Through the feed from Hale's lapel, Leo watched a hallway appear that he could almost smell through the screen. Soap, onions, the ghost of old smoke, light puddled on scuffed linoleum. Hale knocked on a door with a new brass plate and stood to the side. It opened a hand width. A woman's voice asked who needed what. The voice flattened by fatigue and made stubborn by experience. Hale gave a name that would not scare her and held up a hand. We are not police, he said. We are looking for someone who might have helped you with your lock. We owe her a receipt. The voice faltered. The door opened. Inside, the camera caught a flash of Mara's back as she bent to tie a child's shoe. The braid lay over her shoulder. She looked up as if she had felt him watching from far away, and in the second before recognition, Leo saw the person he had misjudged in a dozen small ways. The maid he had treated like a quiet fixture. The girl who moved without asking, who fixed where she stood, who had taken his card and gone off the map with a purpose he could not excuse and could not dismiss. Bring her in, he said again, more softly. The words sat between command and plea, and the line of his life shifted, just a little, while the camera steadied on the threshold of a door someone had bothered to make safe. The rain had finally let up when Gray came back to the house, coat shoulders wet and the leather folio darker than usual. Leo was in the study, curtains open to a slice of stormlight, the scent of wet boxwood drifting in. He had been practicing indifference, fingers drumming at the edge of the desk. The old habit of pretending to be above the theater of his own ideas. When Gray shut the door and crossed the rug, Leo told himself he would not flinch at the tally. Gray laid the folio down like a verdict and began to take out thin slips of paper. He did not speak. He set the receipts in a careful line, each with a small paper clip, each with a handwritten note in the corner, in tidy, unhurried script. Leo picked up the top one. It was from his own payroll service, the kind of beatless document he usually never saw. It named the house staff by last name and initial, the ones who passed him silently in halls and put fresh flowers in low bowls. There was a line at the bottom that read adjustment for back wages, and a date from early in the year. Mara had written, "This was owed." I found the discrepancy in the schedule book. Something in Leo's throat tightened. He had hired a firm to manage the house. He had signed off on the budget. He had assumed precision. He had trusted systems that ran like the clocks in his collection, smooth and unfeeling. The receipt told a different story, one that included overtime hours missed and whispered embarrassment from the man who tended the long hedge. Gray watched him read, his own hands folded against the flood of words that were still coming. The second receipt was softer at the edges, as if it had been passed from palm to palm. It was from a clinic on the other side of the hill, the kind of small place Leo had not stepped into since he could afford names with late-night call lines. It listed a balance, then a new balance. 0. The note on the corner said, "Farhana, Dom's wife. They had not told you because she did not want to seem ungrateful. She is healing. Please do not make it a spectacle." Leo could picture Dom, the groundskeeper with sunburnt forearms and a gentle way with saplings, the way he laughed with his whole face. He saw him standing beside his wife at that clinic, his cap twisting in his hands. He had never asked why Dom had taken extra weekends. He had taken the manicured lawn for granted, as though the grass cut itself to a polite height. The next slip was from a school district office in a neighborhood so familiar, Leo could draw the cracked sidewalks from memory. He had once carried a tray down that cafeteria line, had learned the price of things by the way they pressed heavy against a pocket. The receipt's description read, "Student lunch balances cleared." Someone had stamped it with a clumsy red paid, and Mara had written, "So no child is turned away in the line. Your old school. I remember the crest on your jacket, in the photo, in the pantry." He sat very still. He had framed that photo without ever saying aloud what came after it, the days he went hungry on purpose to keep a friend from being embarrassed, the time the cashier slid a carton of milk into his hand without charging and he vowed he would send help someday, when someday arrived. He had sent help after a fashion. He had built a wing with his name. He had forgotten there are smaller debts that crush smaller backs. Beneath that was a long grocery receipt that read like a list of care. Rice, beans, oats, cooking oil, diapers in various sizes, shelves for the pantry to replace the sagging wood. Canned tomatoes that last, spice in small jars, because dignity tastes like something. Soap, toothpaste. She had even included a line for light bulbs, a simple grace that keeps a room bright when night comes early in winter. At the bottom she had written, "Restocked the community pantry." The shelves were bowed. Mrs. Alvarez cried and then laughed, and told me to take a jar of honey. I did not. It went on, but it did not go on in the way he expected. No boutique, no sleek electronics, no late-night tasting menu, no bottle from a vineyard with a name that demanded reverence, not even shoes. There was an empty envelope with the word return written on it in Mara's hand, and inside the empty envelope was his credit card, edges still warm from the days it had gone out into the world without him. Gray cleared his throat. She asked me not to make a show of it. She said some wrong things can be set right quietly. Leo traced the ink of the notes with a fingertip. His mind tried to gather up all the ways this could have been showy. How a person with a borrowed card could have turned kindness into a performance. Instead, there were only receipts that read like a ledger of attention. He found himself searching for a single indulgence that might let him place her in a narrative more comfortable to his pride. There was none. The closest he came was a tank of gas, and he realized even that was in the name of studying the city's distances, not her own. "Why did you test her?" Gray asked, not unkindly. "It was meant to be a puzzle," Leo said, but the words fell wrong. It was meant to be a way to see. He stood. His legs knew where to go without consulting him. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft thump of water in a sink. The courtyard was still beading with rain. He found her in the herb garden, knees in the damp dirt, sleeves pushed back, hands smelling of lemon and earth. She looked up without surprise. The sparrows in the quince tree chattered, as if there were matters more pressing than the rich man with the receipts. "You knew about the wages," he said. "I keep the rota," she said. "I see who takes an extra hour, and who quietly leaves early, to care for a father." The math was wrong. Dom's wife did not have a choice about timing. The pantry was empty on Thursday evening. The school. Well, that is your story too. Yes. He could not find a grand sentence. "I am sorry," he said, "for not knowing, for asking you to carry a test you did not need." "It was not heavy," she said. "It was your card for a weekend, and some people needed what it could do. I did not think it was about passing. I thought it was about doing the most good before it had to go back in a drawer." "Did you want nothing for yourself?" he asked. His voice was careful, as if trying to avoid breaking something unseen. She smiled, not gentle, not mocking, simply honest. "I have what I need. And if I needed something, I would ask. I do not think you would say no to a new vacuum or better knives. But those can wait. The pantry could not." He looked past her at the narrow path between rosemary. Outside the wall, the world had been moving along, unwatched, while he sketched theories of character and providence. Inside, a woman had taken a plastic rectangle and turned it into wages paid, a hospital bill erased, trays in a cafeteria loaded without shame, shelves full of staples that would make dinners where laughter could return. Back in the study, Gray had gathered the receipts into a neat stack, but Leo could still see them, bright as postcards, each with its own scene. He sat and let the quiet press in around him. He had broken his own heart by designing a measure that proved him smaller than he wished. But something else cracked open too. a space where decisions could be different. Tell payroll to audit everything, he said. Fix it and apologize. Set up a fund at the clinic, anonymous. The school, make sure lunch debt never returns. The pantry needs stable shelves and a regular restock. Ask Mara what else is missing. Ask everyone. Gray nodded, eyes steady. And you? Leo picked up the empty envelope and turned it over in his hands. Me, he said. I will stop pretending that generosity requires spectacle, and I will stop mistaking tests for truths when people have been telling me who they are the whole time. He slipped the card back into the drawer. He had been terrified of being taken. Instead, he had been given a story, written in ink on cheap paper, that had asked for nothing and returned everything worth keeping. In the garden, the sparrows rose as a cloud, and then settled again, untroubled by the small storms men make for themselves. The photograph on the mantel had always leaned a little to the left, his mother caught mid-laugh with a carton of donated paperbacks in her arms. Leo had stopped seeing it a long time ago, the way you stop seeing your own reflection after so many hurried mornings. Only today the light from the tall windows of the penthouse struck the glass in a way that made him look again. In the background of the photo, almost out of focus, was a narrow brick building with flaking paint and a carved lintel. A hand-painted sign in the window read, in cheerful block letters, Neighborhood Library. He remembered afternoons of carpet burn on his elbows, and the scrape of linoleum under chairs as children wriggled closer to his mother's voice. She used to volunteer there, tucking her hair behind her ear, and reading about faraway places while the radiator hissed like a sleepy dragon. He could still recall the smell of old glue and the soft dust of coats shaken out in winter. The test had seemed clever when he designed it, a neat little experiment to measure character. He wanted to see what people wanted when they were told they could have anything. He had not intended to think of the photo, or the way his mother would have rolled her eyes at the entire thing. On impulse he took the photograph down. There was writing on the back, a neat looped script where she had noted the address in case she needed to send a thank you note to a donor. It was not far. He did not know why he was moving even before the valet pulled the car around, why the elevator felt too slow, why the city itself pressed in tight as he passed rows of shuttered storefronts and the occasional burst of laughter from a stoop. The library sat squat and stubborn, windows cloudy with grime, chain looped through the handles of the double doors. Someone had tacked a notice to the glass. Delinquent taxes, pending auction. Something in his chest tightened, a pane of ice over a deep place he had not visited since the funeral. Then he saw her. Mara was on a borrowed stepladder, her braid tucked into the collar of a work jacket, one hand steady on the doorframe as she worked a new cylinder into place. A toolbox sat open at her feet. He almost did not recognize the soft humming that drifted from her, a lullaby melody that had once been his nightlight. She looked down when she felt him looking, and did not flinch. She climbed the last rung, and tightened the screws with a gentle, decisive twist, then came down and wiped her hands on a rag like a mechanic closing the hood on a resurrected car. You followed the address, she said. Her voice held neither apology nor triumph, only a deep tiredness and a quiet hope. He could not find words. He reached for the door handle out of habit, felt the new lock resist, and then clicked open under her hand. Inside, the dust was thicker than he remembered. Rows of shelves, crouched like patient animals. The circulation desk had a coffee ring and an abandoned paperclip chain. Beyond the children's corner, someone had stacked folding chairs. The air smelled of time and sunlight. And something else. The ghost of lemon furniture. Polish. He turned to her, panic scraping his throat. What did you do? She shrugged, a small motion that did not hide the tremor in her hand. Paid the taxes. Called the city. Talked to a woman. Who remembered your mother. Reading here, every week. I thought the lock should be changed before the wrong people got back in. The old ones were snapped. With my card, he said, and the words came out more accusation than question. With your card, she said. Then, softer, with your name. He stared at her. She reached into the pocket of the jacket and unfolded a crinkled set of receipts and a stamped certificate with an official seal. His mother's name appeared on a provisional notice of gift and on a request for a commemorative plaque. He traced the letters without touching them, the shape of his mother's life condensed into ink that still smelled faintly of the office where it had been pressed. I could have bought a new watch, she said, almost teasing, or some dress I would never wear. I stood in front of a window full of shoes that could have paid 1 month and left this place to close when the rest came due. That felt like empty calories, like licking frosting and never tasting cake. He remembered her quietly noticing everything in his home, the cracked seam in the leather of the sofa, the way the orchid leaned toward the cold glass, the photo on the mantel. He remembered giving her the card with a smile that was meant to be disarming. A maid, as if that were a whole story, and not a job. Mara stepped closer, the paper crinkling softly in her fingers. The librarian said, "Your mother taught her to use a computer here, that she kept a list of names in a spiral notebook and never once refused a person because their address was a shelter or a borrowed couch. The city was going to wipe this place from the map over a debt that should never have been allowed to grow. I thought, if you were my son, what would I hope someone did for you to keep you from forgetting?" She held his gaze. "You don't need more things. You need to remember who you are." The words fell into him like a stone into deep water. The ripples reached everything. He felt the part of him that had made a game of people, that collected artifacts of success and lined them up on shelves he rarely looked at, pull back like a shadow at dusk. He saw his mother as she had been here, mouth open mid-sentence, cheeks flushed, alive. He saw himself, small knees in itchy corduroys, the weight of her hand on his head, the way she laughed even when it rained so hard the lights flickered. He sank onto a low bench that wobbled and steadied under his weight. It came out of him then, the breath he did not know he had been holding for years. And with it a grief so raw and clean, he felt almost new. He covered his face with his hands, and did not care that dust smeared his cuffs, that his shoulders shook. Mara stood beside him, without touching, a presence like a wall holding up a roof. This was not the outcome he had scripted in the quiet theater of his ego. He had expected something he could measure. He had given money to many places, his name carved in stone in lobbies that smelled of polish and power. He had never thought to pay a tax bill for a building that saved lonely afternoons and taught children to find themselves between covers. When he finally looked up, the late light had slid across the floor to pool in the children's corner. A faded poster of a whale smiled above a rug shaped like a giant leaf. He pictured his mother sitting cross-legged there, the line of her jaw and the softness at the corners of her eyes. He felt both broken and repaired, the way a cracked bowl holds together when someone takes the time to fill the fracture with gold. "You change the locks," he said, hoarse. "So no one can take this back before the papers finish moving," she said. "So it will be here, when the doors open again. So when you are ready to tell me what your mother loved about this place, it will be more than a memory." He nodded. He could not answer with words yet, but something inside him had already said yes. He reached for the receipts like a lifeline, tucked them against his chest, and felt the thud of his own heart beneath the paper. He did not know how to pay her back for what she had done, perhaps because she had not taken anything that belonged to him in the first place. She had given him the only thing he had been too afraid to buy for himself, a way back. The morning unfurled grey and glassy across the city, rain beating the office windows like the world was holding its breath. Leo sat alone with 2 stacks on his desk. On the left were receipts that wore the gleam of self-promotion, the perfume of a world that asked nothing of him but money. Velvet garment bags, a boutique hotel in Rome with a rooftop pool, and an overnight butler whose name might as well have been excess. There was champagne from a vineyard that boasted a waiting list, and a leather collar for a dog that would never be walked. An entire wardrobe in clanging colors and tags, the kind that photographed well in mirrors. There were bookings for yachts, and a deposit on a table at a club whose currency was exclusion. The name on all of it was Vanessa. On the right were invoices printed on plain paper. Every line told a different kind of story, one he recognized in his bones. An antique clockmaker, in a neighborhood shop that smelled of oil and dust. A luthier who had spent weeks coaxing a cello back to voice. Paint from a hardware store with fluorescent lights. Receipt ink already fading. A conservator whose entire website was a phone number and a sample photograph of stained canvas becoming clear again. Small transfers to people whose names were unfamiliar, but whose work he could see when he closed his eyes. The winter garden in the courtyard that his mother had planted when he was a boy had been brown for years. Now there were hydrants of color and climbing roses tied with twine. The portrait of the company founder that had hung crooked and foxed in the lobby was suddenly upright, varnish lifted so the eyes looked like they could see. A plaque appeared beside it that he had not authorized, a simple brass square that read, "Gift of the people who keep the lights on." He touched the right-hand stack and felt something in his chest shift. The night before, he had walked through the service elevators because he could not sleep, and found the staff lounge lit by a single lamp. There had been the clock on the wall ticking with a steadier rhythm. The old piano in the corner had made no sound for years. Everyone used it as a table for lunch bags. On that night he saw Mara, sleeves rolled up, pressing a key. The first sound had rolled into the room like a breath after grief. It was not a perfect note. It broke his heart anyway. He pressed the call button on his desk. His assistant appeared with an expression that meant another fire was arriving on the line. Instead he said, "Thank you for being here," and dictated the list of cancellations. Every luxury order under Vanessa's name, every reservation she had leveraged with his status, return them. Apologize to anyone who worked hard on them and compensate their time, but end them. When Vanessa called in a storm of disbelief, he took the call himself and listened to the storm break against him. He did not raise his voice. He explained quietly that the card had been a choice and she had made hers very clear. He wished her well. When she asked if he was punishing her for dreaming too loudly, he paused. "I am turning down a life that makes me smaller," he said. Then he hung up and the line went soft. The budget meeting that had been set to finalize the layoffs was held anyway. The faces arrayed around the table were defensive and tired. Slide decks flashed with strategic narratives. He let them present. He listened to the arguments for streamlining, for trimming, for efficiencies, for the shareholder letters that would praise decisiveness. Then he rose, moved the projector aside, and said the simplest thing he could think of: "We are not doing this." There was a thrum of surprise. The HR director blinked. The CFO set down his pen and asked if Leo would like to delay the decision for a quarter to gather more data. He shook his head. He had put this machine in motion. He would be the one to stop it. "I am sorry," he said, and meant not just to them but to the people beyond these walls who were already dreading the envelope. "I lost track of what we are here for. That is my failure. I am halting the layoffs. We will redeploy. We will offer training. We will take a hit now and be better over time. If that means discomfort, let it be mine first." Silence held and then gave way. Questions came. Numbers were scribbled. Plans were sketched. He could feel the old rhythm of the company, the one built on craft and not just speed, begin again. He asked for an all-staff meeting that afternoon. The atrium filled. Voices folded into each other like a tide. Leo stood on the low steps. No podium, no teleprompter. He told them the same truth he had told the boardroom, and then he told them something he had not told anyone. "When my mother first brought me here, she pointed to that portrait in the lobby and said, 'Do not forget the hands that hold what you build, or nothing you make will stand.' I forgot. I am here asking your patience while I learn again." He saw faces soften. He saw arms cross in wary protection. Trust takes time to mend. He would not demand it. He would earn it. After, in the hush of his office, he called Mara. She came in with the same calm she carried through corridors. She still wore the uniform of a person whose work is only noticed when it is not done. The badge at her collar bore her name. And nothing else. She looked at him and did not fidget, did not cast around to prepare herself for blame. He had never known how rare that was, to meet someone's gaze without calculation. "I saw what you did," he said. "The garden. The portrait. The piano." His voice almost failed on the last word. "It reminded me of someone I miss." She looked down, a flush rising like dawn. "I did not want to presume. You said to use the card in the way that felt right. Some things have been broken so long people forgot they could be mended." He picked up the envelope on his desk. Inside was the same credit card he had given her as a test. He placed it in front of her but did not push it toward her. "This is not a test anymore. This is trust. I am asking you to help me build something I should have started long ago. A foundation that restores what working hands keep alive. Not just objects. Places. People. Skills. We will fund repair, apprenticeship, gardens in neighborhoods that have lost their color. You would lead it." She laughed once, and it sounded like disbelief hiding behind joy. "I scrub floors, Mr. Rook. You also saw what was worth saving when I did not. Titles are small things." She picked up the card, weighed it like an object that could burn and illuminate. "Only if there is a board," she said softly. "People from here, from the warehouses and kitchens and the loading docks, only if it belongs to more than us." He could have kissed the hem of that sentence. "Agreed," he said. "And only if you tell me when I am about to forget again." Mara nodded, Her hands trembled and steadied. "There is one more receipt you have not seen," she said. "The piano tuner came back this morning. Tonight is the early shift party. They decide what songs." He laughed then, a sound he could feel in his ribs. "Good. Let them choose. Let them fill the place with their own music." He walked her to the door, and as she left, he looked out over the city, whose mirror had once reflected only his own face. Rain had stopped. The glass showed light arriving in sly little shards along the avenues. It would not be simple. It would not be solved by one apology or one fund, or even 100, but at least he had chosen which side of the desk to sit on. At least he had chosen what mattered. The new sign over the brick arch reads Hartley Community Learning Center, the paint still bright enough to mirror the morning. Leo stands on the steps where he used to dare himself to take 2 at a time when he was a boy. Today the doors are propped open with book carts, and children run in holding hands, the little ones tugging their older siblings toward rows of picture books that smell like glue and paper and the cool dust of a place that knows patience. In the lobby, there is a folding table set up for new cards. He sits there for the first hour, asking names, spelling them slowly as he prints each one, passing the laminated slips over with a smile so wide it makes his cheeks ache. There is a pantry at the far end of the ground floor, behind what used to be a quiet reading room. It hums with the soft order of a kitchen. Volunteers in aprons scoop lentils and rice, stack oranges into pyramids, label bags with simple notes. "Take what you need, share when you can." Alma wrote those words in her neat script on the first day the pantry opened, leaving the ink pen pressed between 2 jars of dried beans before she left. He has not moved the pen. It waits there, a slender reminder in the corner of his eye, while he carries sacks and sets them down for people whose names he is learning, along with their favorite bread, the bus lines they take, the schools their children attend. The lunch fund is no longer a patch, no longer a quiet handful of bills slipped to a cafeteria manager to erase debt from a ledger no one wanted to admit existed. He made it a promise. The foundation pays for it forever, as far as anything in the world can be forever, and he signed the papers by hand, feeling the weight of each letter. The schools send over monthly totals. He does not frame the reports, he files them, and goes to the kitchens, sits with the crews while they cool trays of peas and talk about their own kids. He learned to measure success in meals and seconds in which a child does not have to feel the hot sting of embarrassment in a lunch line. He learned that from Alma, and from the box. The box sits on his desk even when he is not at the library. It is not pretty. Cardboard rubbed soft at the corners, a bakery logo dulled by time and steam. Inside, every receipt she saved. Thin thermal paper, thicker handwritten slips from shops where the owner knew her name. Ink scribbles in the margins, notes about who benefited, why she chose the cheaper brand, how much was left. He runs his fingers across them sometimes with an impulse he does not question. She never bought herself a thing. She repaired a stroller with a tube of glue, paid for night classes for a man who had been reading in the corner after his shift, stocked long-grain rice and baby formula, picked up extra socks in the cold snap because she had noticed bare ankles under a boy's jeans in the media lab. At the bottom of the stack is the only receipt he cannot read without his throat tightening. A bus ticket. One way. She had drawn a little star beside the line that says destination, as if to tell him that leaving was not a failure, not a vanishing, just a movement toward what she needed to be whole. What broke his heart was not the leaving, he understands now. It was the moment before she left, the last night she stood at his kitchen island and slid the card back to him across the stone. She had been silent. He had not been. He had tried to turn the test into a confession of his own, to say that he needed to know who he could trust, that he did not know what he hoped to prove. She had only nodded, and then opened her worn canvas bag and lifted out the receipts, stacking them in the box she had saved from pastries after the pantry's first holiday drive. She had written a note on top: "Wealth is a tool, not a mirror." Their eyes had met, and he had seen in hers a sadness that was also love for 1,000 strangers. That was the breaking, the revelation that his test had not measured anyone except himself. Vanessa posts her pictures from the reopening. She is in a white dress that floats at her calves, the kind the camera loves. She tags the location, the foundation, him, the mayor, even the florist. Her captions read like cheerful gospel, full of gratitude and curated humility. Behind her smile, someone is trying to keep a toddler from tumbling down the steps. She does not crop him out this time. She picks a photo with a child at her side, a hand tucked into her palm. She has learned the optics, if not the lesson. He does not comment. He leaves her, to her. Following. The people who need the pantry do not read her posts. The lunch fund does not care about angles. He volunteers every week. He does not send an assistant in his place. He has learned to sort book donations by smell and spine, to guide hands to the large print shelves, to find the battered copy of a novel a man read in the service and wants to read again in the light of home. He learns to listen, while a woman whispers her fear about a late fee, and then shows her that there are no fines anymore, not here, not ever again if he can help it. Children know him. They come to the computer lab and ask him to adjust the chair. He does it, then lingers until they wave him away with the assurance of a little king. On the wall, by the circulation desk, is a photograph in a narrow frame. His mother, hair bound in a scarf, reading to him on these same steps, the two of them wrapped in a wool blanket because the library could not afford heat that winter. He keeps a copy on his office desk next to the bakery box. The photo is slightly faded, the white's grown warm with time. In it, his eyes are upturned, and she is in mid-sentence, her mouth open, a smile almost there. It reminds him that he did not become what he is by accident, that people built him, that books and hands and a blanket, and a woman who believed that stories could feed you did it together. On a Wednesday evening, the center holds a class in the meeting room about budgeting and debt, taught by the retired teller who used to cash checks for farm workers without charging a fee. Leo stacks chairs after, wipes down tables. Someone has abandoned a coat, 2 sizes too big. He hangs it near the door with a note. He turns out lights and steps outside into air that smells like rain. Across the street the deli closes, the owner lifting a hand to him. He raises his in answer, and thinks of the first day they stocked the pantry, how the owner had carried in crates without being asked. The world feels quieter now, but it is not a quiet of retreat. It is the quiet of hands at work. There are still messages from Vanessa. There are still long emails from people who think money should be kept where it glints. He lets those messages sit unopened for a day, sometimes 2. He answers only when the answering can be useful. He knows what wealth is for. It is written in Alma's notes. It is tucked into the edges of the old photo. It is standing around him, alive in the murmur of voices that rise and fall as a new family walks through the doors of a place that has learned to say welcome as if it has been waiting for them all along.